Okay, I suspect we're live again, and we are just going to sew it all together. This will be a Frankenstein episode. No big deal. Again, working out bugs, and there's not a rush here. The main thing is we're moving piece by piece, brick by brick. Calamento says Elon shut off the Starlink. Well, Elon shut off all my sock accounts on Twitter. I've got sock accounts which I use to spy on certain adversaries. Each sock account is dedicated to maybe one or two, and there is no way I am getting anywhere close to the 6,000 tweet per day rate limit. And I saw this coming. They definitely are using the rate limit to limit the flow of ideas and specifically idea super spreaders they disapprove of, which would be like me. Yeah, no worries if you got cut off. It's all going to be tied together later. But this is all part of the program. You know, like I said, crawl, walk, run. We've been crawling since probably March, but we're kind of getting to the point where we're actually walking, and then we'll hit the ground running when the 24/7 is back on. Joined by Red 5, Osher G33. Thanks for rejoining. Tomorrow, we'll have the concurrent audio players also on. So if you listen on TuneIn or Radio King or paranormal.radio, you can go there as well. Oswaldo says, don't rate limit exceed me, bro. Well, people thought it was no big deal. They're like, well, 6,000 tweets. Who goes through that many tweets in a day? Well, they set up the infrastructure where now it's arbitrary. Why not 6,666? Why not 4,000 or 4,200? Why not 42 tweets if you don't pay Pope Elon? They chose that number because it seemed far off. And what I had said at the time was they took the infinite plane of tweets, the free flow of ideas, a public commons, and they stuck a dome on top of it, thereby creating a closed system out of what was open. But the barrier is so far off that nobody complained. Certainly not the mainstreamers. And now here we are looking at a situation where nobody's going to be raising any eyebrows when I say, hey, look, I've got rate limits on my tweets. Red 5, could you speak anything about the Canadian wildfires? Yeah, the Canada fires are likely just hyped. Like you get natural phenomenon, they hype it. If they're not creating it, they're hyping what's already there. They can take a drizzle and turn it into a hurricane. They really can. And it's limited by the public's credulity and their competence with CGI, which is getting better as the public becomes increasingly credulous. I mean, the first time I encountered what I consider to be concurrent programming is when I was renting from a Redbox a movie called Geostorm. And the first scene has these fire tornadoes. And I turn on the news, and it's trending on Twitter, fire nados. I'm like, oh, fire nados were just suddenly introduced in this popular movie about the space station controlling the weather, and it catches a virus. So the space station catches a virus, and now the weather systems are screwed up, and it's sending fire nados. And then the phenomenon appears in real life, and now it's real. Red 5 says, I live in Indiana and it smells like burning plastic over here. Well, if you didn't know, the train derailment in Ohio with the subsequent toxic airborne event was just like the one out of the movie White Noise, and just as fake. If you saw any dead fish, yeah, fake. CGI, crisis fish. Yeah, that's what I figured. Calamenta says that's normal for Indiana. Right, it is normal. Look, there's no toxic airborne event. There's no climate change. There's no chemtrails. You can relax. It matters. People will hammer me on this. They'll say, why do you keep on insisting that these things are fake? And I'm like, well, or why don't you just let people believe in it? Like, I'm not trying to control what people believe. But it's just a fact is, if your belief system works against you and your central operating premise for everything is based on a few things that are flawed or wrong, it kind of skews everything. I don't live in the world where I feel like I'm being sprayed in the face by the government every day. And this is how people feel. And then you have the other side where they're saying they believe that the Republicans are damning us all to climate hell. Here's an example. This is to me an example of somebody who's a victim of mind control. You can laugh at the environmentalists who glue themselves to the streets. But look at this here. This is from a Twitter account, my favorite Twitter account, Bevy112. She says, they spray the S out of us and send us alerts because they care about our well-being. Apparently, she received an air quality alert. And she's saying they spray the S out of us, but they send us these alerts because they care about us. I hate this world so much, in all caps. She hates the world. She hates the world so much because it's victimizing her. She's a victim. She's being sprayed by Big Brother. Like, I don't want to get sprayed. You spray me, I would probably want to sue you or call the cops. Like, what does it mean I'm being sprayed? Like, that's a very defeatist position. Yeah, we're just down here getting sprayed on by Big Brother. We're just peons. But no, the thing is, that's a very erroneous interpretation of things that darkens your worldview. It's like being afraid of the dark. Does it serve you to be afraid of the dark? No, there's a point where you grow out of it. These are superstitious beliefs, and they're not verifiable. And I'm saying here is that you can have the belief that might actually taint your worldview and make you afraid to go outside, make you agoraphobic, but that's part of the program. They want you to be agoraphobic, whether it's asteroids, chemtrails, climate change, aliens, nukes, Chinese spy balloons. There's a myriad of ways that they can terrorize you about the sky. And they want you to be afraid of the open space because they're transitioning humanity into lockdown culture. Ubiquitous home incarceration as an ideal. This is their utopia. And when they're rate limiting me on my tweets, that's just to condition me so that when they start rate limiting me on how many steps I can take each day because of my carbon footprint, I won't reject it. We'll be used to it. They'll say, hey, look, we're all carbon super spreaders and we're all damaging the earth. However, if we can get some of you to mitigate how much you walk, let's just say 50,000 steps a day, no, 100,000, everything will be okay. And nobody's going to complain because people don't take any steps anymore. They live in their basements. They live in their Netflix bubble. So they're not thinking about going vast distances. And the next thing you know, I'm trying to go outside on a walk and it's like, sorry, I got some government drone blocking my path. You exceeded your rate limit. I didn't even leave my house. But one of these elitists in a position of power is able to hack the system and target me to keep me from spreading my carbon. Lee and Dion says, rate limit exceeded on your purchases and movements. It's all conditioning, and nobody's fighting it. Look what they do with cap and tax. I used to say, look, they're taxing big business for their so-called carbon output. Wait until they start taxing you for the air that you breathe. And now they are doing it. One Step Too Far says it's public info that the military dumps chemicals in our atmosphere, but the notion it's nefarious is unverifiable. Okay, well, if true, that has zero to do with airplanes, with lines over our cities. And the problem with the whole chemtrail movement is that they consistently share memes that point the finger at commercial airlines. But then when you ask them for the cause of it all, they say it's the invisible stuff in the stratosphere we can't see, the secret military projects. And I'm like, so what are you against? Secret military projects we know nothing about, or condensation trails? It's very confusing. So if you're against something, or if you're worried about what chemicals are being dumped up there by the military, you shouldn't conflate that with the trails that we see following planes. And I actually designed an experiment to prove or disprove chemtrails. And it's true as X322X says. He says, I prayed those chemtrails away. You're welcome. And yeah, you can pray them away. You can boil vinegar on your yard and the chemtrails will go away. You can Do a dancing nurse routine in your front yard. If you accept the premise that if X happens before Y, X caused Y. And a lot of people fall for that. Sleight of mind. There's a lot of sleight of mind in the truther community. A lot of spells have been cast. Now, the thing is, my experiment is this. The primary debate here is, are these being caused by chemicals being dumped, or is it something coming out of the plane that is like adding some sort of toxin, or is it, as mainstream science would say, condensation trails, which would be hot jet air, hot jet, just basically the hot jet exhaust, cold, rarefied air, high altitude, 20,000 feet. That's the conventional explanation. So which is it? So I thought, perhaps if we remove the jet exhaust from the equation, we can get an answer here. So we will do it like this. No airplane. We will get a box full of whatever you think it is that goes into chemtrails. Barium, aluminum, strontium, whatever you think goes into them, we dump it in a box. Then we have one of these high altitude weather balloons carry the box to the stratosphere and dump it in full view of its onboard GoPro camera. And what we will be observing from above and below is what happens when these substances are dumped. Do they create cirrus clouds? Will it create a big persistent cirrus cloud, just like the condensation trails from airplanes or the apparent condensation trails? If it does, in the absence of hot jet exhaust, then that's a big win for the chemtrail believers. It proves that something is up. If it just falls to the earth and it does not create a persistent cloud in the absence of that hot jet exhaust, then I think chemtrail theory has to take a back seat to condensation. Now we just need to find somebody willing to obtain all the substances that go into the chemtrails and get a consensus agreement on it. I'll get the balloon. All right, continuing here. One Step Too Far says chemtrailers will spend more on cellular data posting videos of the poison air they breathe rather than moving, proof they believe it's real. Well, this is the point that I'm getting to. It's not about isolating groups and calling out the flaws in their arguments so much as pointing out that we're dealing with belief. And the truther beliefs are the counter beliefs to the mainstream media promulgated lies. It's not an exaggeration to say mass media is just a liar. It is collectively a big liar. It's giving you a lie-based worldview. But the truthers aren't telling the truth necessarily. They're telling the counter narrative to the promulgated lies. So it's believers versus believers. It's like if you look at religious arguments, two religious factions, they're both fighting over who's got the right God, who's got the right doctrines. Is it possible they're both wrong? And if it's possible that is it possible religions can be wrong and that they can fight and each think they're fighting for the truth and none of them have it? Well, absolutely. And what I'm suggesting here is that trutherism is practically a religion. If you can say that the mainstream media is the de facto state church, then you could say that its counter is simply another variant. It's a religion. And I say this all the time, that the alternative media shares the same media ecosystem with the mainstream. They're all under the same bubble. Or they're all in the same container, the same closed system. Portal Complex says, I saw Will You Marry Me chemtrail in red, looked dangerous. Well, the skywriting is something I was actually looking into today because someone had suggested that maybe they're using skywriting materials. Not dangerous, but scary. And they're doing it to scare conspiracy theorists. And I thought, well, you know what? Does that sound far-fetched? Not at all. It's actually on brand. Because this is the same diabolical mind control operation that also has most of the population afraid of global warming. If part of their psychological warfare operation writ large, the worldview warfare, its fearocracy, has the lemmings afraid of the sky, then of course they're going to want the people who don't follow the mainstream church to have some kind of counterpart. So the mainstreamers fear climate change. What do the people who don't believe those scientists fear? Well, you give them chemtrails. And how would you produce such a phenomenon? Some kind of additive. So that kind of makes sense. That kind of makes sense. But I have to rule it out because the substance they use in skywriting is something that is clearly being ejected and sprayed from the plane, whereas the condensation trails aren't being sprayed. And you can determine this just by looking at the distance between the engines and the formation of these clouds, and then consider the rate that the plane is traveling, because it doesn't form a cloud immediately out of the jet. In fact, looking back, if you're in a plane, you might not even notice it's leaving condensation trails. Okay, continuing here. Nick the NASA pimp says, no way is this live. How's NASA doing these days? Have they colonized the moon yet? Have they achieved anything that they said they were? I mean, they really have low expectations. The ISS has very little interesting stuff going on other than Tom Cruise is going up there soon. Haven't heard anything big from them. I was under the impression that the Chinese space station would be an improvement, graphics-wise. I thought, are they going to bring out that surround LED screen? Are they going to create convincing zero-G scenes? And they actually took a step back. They actually went back to like 2010 level graphics. And I'm thinking, okay, looks to me like they're not trying to improve the graphics for the Chinese space program in some sort of way to outdo the Americans. Because I thought if the Chinese space program came out and it looked real, the ISS would kind of have to be phased out. Portal Complex says NASA had a press conference announcing aliens again. Yeah, it's kind of ironic that the government denies aliens. Conspiracy theorists believe in aliens. Government says aliens are real. Conspiracy theorists say aliens must be fake. Very contrarian. My favorite thing about the Chinese space station, though, is they have these cups that don't float, and you can pour water in these cups, and the water doesn't float. So they don't have to use those bags where you have to squeeze the water into your mouth, those Mylar bags. No, you just pour yourself a cup of water in the Chinese space station. Okay, let's see here. One step too far. It says, it's exactly why they don't censor Richie from Boston, because the numerology psychosis provides the government so many utilities. If you want to call in and talk about it, the number's on the screen. I haven't heard from Richie from Boston. I thought they got him. He actually was scared, and I believe many of his followers were scared back in March of 2020, March 31st, right before April Fool's Day. Richie comes out and he says, on April Fool's Day, they're going to shut off the internet. A black car is going to show up at my house. They're going to take me, and you're never going to hear from me again. He said this. And then he said that if you use his promo code, you can get a discount on his storable food items. And I just thought, wait a minute here. If I spend my last few dollars on Richie from Boston storable food items to survive the apocalypse, and they shut off the internet, how am I going to get my storable food items? So I didn't order. Joined by Frank Murr. Thank you for joining. Or rejoining if you had to come back. We were bounced off. A gremlin had managed to cut our service for a moment. Let me go through my Twitter feed. There's been quite a lot going on in the Twitter sphere. I found myself getting into some sort of debates with these Hunter Biden fetishists. It's really sick. I mean, politics is already sick, but it's getting a little sicker. And I actually, look, Tucker Carlson put out a video where he said that The Sound of Freedom is a very serious movie, and by trying to compare it to QAnon, you're destroying the credibility of the message and damaging the cause, which is saving children. And I'm like, okay, what's going on here? Is Tucker Carlson not aware that Jim Caviezel is a full-blown QAnoner? Is he not aware that Tim Ballard is a Wayfair conspiracy theorist? So there's something going on here. Either A, Tucker doesn't know and he's out of the loop, or B, he's being disingenuous. What do you think? I feel the same way about RFK Jr. RFK Jr. says the virus that the Chinese made won't kill Jews. It'll just kill whites and blacks. And then later he says, I wasn't saying that Jews were behind the pandemic, or I wasn't insinuating that it wouldn't, like, basically he says one thing and then he contradicts it. Or he says, I wasn't insinuating that, which is fine. You can make that claim. However, the insinuation is obvious to anybody with half a brain. So if you're going to claim that you were not aware of the implication of that statement, then you just admitted that you're not fit to be president, because you have no concept of public relations and how something might look, which is a huge part of politics. Or he's very aware that his listeners are probably stooges who aren't going to care. Nick the Nasty Pimp says, Sound of Disinfo. Well, here's what I did. I put out a poll and I asked, is Sound of Freedom a cult movie, spelled with a Q? And I'm not denying child trafficking. It's worse than they say. And it's institutionalized. And there are entire religions that enslave women. And I mean, slavery is at an all-time high. That's definitely the case. But I'm just suggesting that they're taking the issue and repackaging it as a right-wing political football. And they're using it for money, for grift, to get into elections. I don't think that this has anything to do with actually saving children. I think it's kind of, if anything, it's like they're rebooting the whole Pizzagate thing. And something else to consider, the movie was supposed to come out in 2018, 2019, before 2020. And had it come out then, it would have been full of MAGA hats. Every theater would have been a MAGA rally. That's when it was supposed to come out. So this is all, if you ask me, here's my bottom line. I think Tim Ballard is an actor. And I think this entire thing was a psyop. He's an agent. And I think the whole psyop was engineered to bolster the credibility of the QAnon war on the deep state and its adrenochrome-fueled child trafficking. I think it's a psyop. And furthermore, there's more to it I can add to it. I really can. I think there's a little more. One Step says, most people don't know Tucker used to be best friends with David Brock, Media Matters, James Elefantis, Ping Pong Pizza, and Hunter Biden, his wife's best friend's husband. Okay. Well, it wouldn't surprise me. Like, I think Roger Stone and Hunter Biden probably belong to the same sex clubs. Like, they're all in the same groups. But the thing is, Hunter Biden, maybe he's a disgusting crackhead, but the people who are promulgating the notion that the laptop somehow vindicates QAnon or Pizzagate or adrenochrome or Sound of Freedom, it does not. It's rather mundane. It's just the usual political garbage, political corruption as usual. No different than the stuff they have. In fact, they have worse stuff against Trump. There's no woman that can have Hunter Biden show up in court and have to defend himself against rape charges. So if you want to look at it from an objective point of view, it's basically a mud fleeing contest on both sides. And they're just seeing what can stick. Nothing new here. But, back to this thing with Hunter Biden, there is no evidence of child abuse in his laptop. And you have these Marco Polo, George News, they're selling copies of the laptop. You just buy a book with like 500 pages and you can basically pretend like you're going through Hunter's laptop. And there are MAGAs across the country spending their time going through that laptop. And then they're bragging about what they found. And they're saying, oh, you don't believe it has child abuse? You must be one of them. And I'm like, are you admitting here that you've actually seen something, that you purchased it? And then here's where it gets even sicker. Because the evidence isn't there, they are manufacturing it with Photoshop. They are manufacturing it with fan fiction. And it's pretty sick. I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example of how low they've gone, because this is probably the worst thing I've seen on the internet in some time. This is just a sick level that they have stooped to. Very surprising. And the person who did it is a Twitter MAGA influencer type, and he's just not admitting it. The channel in question, the name is Sean Tabor. Now, Sean Tabor on Twitter, SeanPtaber, he posts this video of Joe Biden getting out of a jet and his granddaughter's behind him. And what they have done, since she's wearing a skirt, is they have darkened her knees to make them look bruised. And then they insinuated that she had just been abused by Joe Biden. Like, so this is sick. This is like fiction that they created, and it's exploitative of them. I don't know how old she is, but the fact that they included this, they photoshopped marks on the knees in order to disparage Joe Biden. Now, whether or not you like the president, it's not really the issue here. The issue here is these are so-called truthers, and they're liars. These are people part of this influence operation trying to get you to watch this movie, chastising you if you don't go, and they're having to manufacture stuff. Like, this is one of the sickest things that I've seen. Of course, I flagged it. It took me 5 seconds to find out this was fake. Now, here's where it's pretty pathetic, though, is that the original one was retweeted 758 times. That's 758 media illiterates. It was liked 1,678 times. That's 1,678 consumers of fake simulated child abuse fan fiction. And 90,000 people viewed it until I came along to correct the record. And I get chastised by these individuals. Again, this is, to me, I'm looking here. This is why I've been blocked so many times on Twitter. I'm trying to read my tweets from earlier, and it says, you're unable to read this tweet because they limited who can view it. Now, this guy, Gary TG, comes out, and this gets interesting. He says, oh, we found an ignorant leftist. The FBI has already verified the laptop, you clown. Well, one, I'm not a leftist. I'm not a leftist. I'm not a rightist. There isn't a political platform or party that represents common sense. Well, he called me a clown, and maybe I'm not the most mature tweeter, but I actually photoshopped clown makeup on his face. And as I was digging into him, he had a very small account, 49 followers. Turns out he's followed by none other than Roger Stone. So I'm thinking, he's being followed by Roger Stone, who's close to a pedo groomer named Ollie Alexander. I mean, this guy is being followed by somebody who's dead center in the middle of the GOP blackmail ring that's been there for decades. What's going on here? One Stop Too Far says laptop proves Hunter's a creep who's complicit in crimes. Oh, yes, exactly. I mean, is he any creepier than Trump's children? Just being objective. Joined by Yurt Mama, Clockwork 113. Thanks for joining. Salty Siren says AI simulates the story the actors acted out, while another AI program narrates for news, and then both left and right extremists simulate their individual desires upon it via AI. That got me thinking. And he would know. James Cameron had said that AI would eliminate humanity by creating deep fakes to put us at war with one another. Here's what he said back in January 2022. If Skynet ever emerges in our world, and Skynet is the ubiquitous AI, it's what Dr. Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum 666 call Gaia, which is the name of an Earth god, the Global AI Alliance. But here's what James Cameron said. If Skynet ever emerges in our world, evil AI could plot humanity's downfall easily by creating seemingly realistic but ultimately fake videos to fool people into hating one another. Skynet would destroy people with deep fakes, not nukes. Now, what's more, about this movie, there are people who are claiming that AMC is shutting off the air conditioning, that they are sabotaging the viewing experience for the people who went there for their simulated child abuse fan fiction, right wing hero narrative, because it's totally partisan. It's that bad. This is so terrible. I don't even want to open this tweet here. I'll go ahead and open it because we're going through this. Because there are people who are coming out and they're saying, "Oh, I went in there and the air conditioning was off, or they shut off the lights." And I've looked into some of these people, and they all seem to be influencers. Like there's this one video that's going viral